Good morning to Galina. We heard from Vladimir Putin for the first time. What do you make of what the Russian president had to say?
Good morning, Belle. After days of statements by various Russian officials, Vladimir Putin has finally spoken out, and he has sent a very clear message to Ukraine and to the rest of the world. This message is that the totality of Azov Sea is the Russian territory, and Russia will not allow Ukraine there anymore. By this move, Russia extends its sphere of influence into the Black Sea, which has some NATO countries on its shores. Yesterday, Vladimir Putin accused Petro Poroshenko of staging this sea clash in order to boost his ratings ahead of the presidential elections. And he said that the Ukrainian ships have deliberately breached the Russian sea border, and that the Russian officers have acted in a very good and professional way by protecting the borders of Russia, which could also mean that all the appeals of the West to release the crew will stay without an answer for now. Today, Vladimir Putin is attending the Russian Security Council meeting, and Russia is getting ready to what it says new provocations from Ukraine.
And what about Russians? What do they make of Vladimir Putin's comments?
Well, Russians are watching TV, and TV is really putting all of its attention to what has happened in the Kerch Strait, and the word provocation is the top line. And yesterday, one presenter of a very popular Russian state TV show said that if there is a war, it will be finished in 15 minutes. She was yelling at a guest who represented the Ukrainian side and who tried to convince her that a dialogue is needed here. Other media quote war experts who say that this war is in the head of Petro Poroshenko, exists only in his head, and they also quote Putin, but not only Putin, but also Lavrov, the foreign minister, who said that some Western countries regret that they did not construct the NATO bases in Crimea, and Crimea, meanwhile, is expecting a new portion of S-400 surface-to-air missile systems. And this news came with the speech of Vladimir Putin. I think that this move was planned quite ahead, but the fact that this news came those days is another signal that Moscow is sending that it is very serious in regards of protecting its territory and its waters.
All right, thank you very much. Galina Polonskaya there. In Georgia, voters have elected the country's first female president. Backed by the ruling Georgian Dream Party, Salome Zurabishvili claimed victory by landslide over Grigol Vashadze, winning 59% of the vote with nearly all the ballots counted. The French-born ex-diplomat will take on a role that's due to become largely ceremonial when Georgia's new constitution comes into force. The runoff vote was the last time a president will be directly elected in Georgia. But the election's also seen as an indicator of how parliamentary elections in 2020 could go. Well, early this morning, the president-elect said she wanted Georgia to unite behind her.
Our choice is a peaceful Georgia, a united country of equal citizens. Our choice is dialogue with those parts of society who today did not vote for me and who today do not agree with us. But we are all citizens of one country.
Well, let's stay with this story and get a little bit more political analysis. To do that, I'm joined by David Shichinava, who joined us from Tbilisi. He works for the CRRC Georgia think tank. Good morning, Mr. Shichinava. Thank you for joining us on the program.
Good morning. Thanks for having me.
Now, the president-elect has been described by pro-Russian opponents, she's been described as pro-Russian by some of her opponents, perhaps that she's trying to seek more alignment with Russia. Is that something that you would agree with?
Okay, I guess when speaking about the president of Georgia right now, as you correctly mentioned, that it's more or less of a figurehead rather than a figure which actually has to say when deciding policy, important policy issues, especially regarding foreign policy orientation. Therefore, the government, by all means, will continue its previous policies, which was actually directed towards closer integration with the European Union. Basically, current government signed the association agreement, and actually they are also participating actively NATO-led operations. So my answer would be that there won't be any changes in that regard.
But if we look at her past record, both as a diplomat and in a ministerial role, could we draw from that she's quite pragmatic in the sense that Georgia needs to position itself between Russia and between the West, be that the EU, be that NATO? Her opponents certainly would like to see closer NATO, closer EU rapprochement, but is Ms. Zurabishvili going to do the same?
I definitely agree that she will try be more pragmatic, but to be frank, I do not see many changes in Georgia's drive towards the West. Yeah, maybe on the declarative level, she and maybe some other government officials might be a little bit milder than, for instance, Mr. Saakashvili was during the previous government, but key line of how the government acts in the international stage, it won't change dramatically. That's what the current situation indicates so far.
Okay. There were accusations from the opposition of voting irregularities during the election process. Was this carried out, in your opinion, this election on a level playing field?
Great question. So electoral process, of course, consists of the processes which occur during the election day and before the election day. Basically, there were several aspects which still remain problematic in the campaigning period. So these are campaign finances. It was not an equal field. Mr. Zurabishvili was able to garner about 8 million Georgian laris, which are around $4 million US, and it was far more than her opponents from all political parties. Secondly, especially during the run of campaigns, there was a huge campaign in the social networks, and the government party, the government actually hired some political consultancies, let's say from Israel and from other countries, to direct that. And thirdly, it was really important that the government announced cutting off loans, small loans for about 600,000 people. And to give you a context, over-indebtedness is a very important problem, which Georgians, especially the poorest part of Georgians, face.
Okay.
So
Yes, thank you. Well, thank you.
A trophy for a king, or at least the man who managed to hold on to his king. Norway's Magnus Carlsen is now world chess champion for the 4th time after defeating challenger Fabiano Caruana in nail-biting tiebreakers. He won in 3 quickfire games after all 12 regular games ended in draws for the first time in chess history.
It's very special for me to win this time. I feel like I played, the Fabiano was the strongest opponent that I've played so far in the World Championship match, and in classical chess he has at this point just as much right as I have to call himself the best in the world.
It was heartbreak for Caruana, who'd hoped to become the first US champion since Bobby Fischer won in 1972.
I had added pressure because I was the first American challenger in a long time. I think the match naturally comes with a lot of pressure. But yeah, right now I'm mainly disappointed. I mean, it's still so fresh, but I hope that I can look back at the match and learn a lot from it.
The 27-year-old Norwegian has held the crown since 2013. If anybody in the world is aiming for a checkmate against Carlsen, they'll have to wait for next time.